name's Tiffany and I'm a dietitian and lactation counselor with the Hamilton County WIC program. Today I want to talk about how to get a good deep latch. A lot of times when a mom is having trouble breastfeeding due to low milk supply or maybe nipple pain, what the actual cause of those problems is a poor latch. So that's why this video is extra important, because if you can get a good deep latch, you can help prevent nipple pain and low milk supply. In order to understand how to get a good latch, we need to think about the inside of a baby's mouth. So inside of your baby's mouth, there is a hard palate and a soft palate. You can actually feel this in your own mouth. If you run your tongue up the top of your mouth, you'll feel a hard palate, and then in the back, you'll feel that soft palate. Your nipple needs to get back to the soft palate for your breastfeeding experience to be comfortable and to help with your milk flow. If it's not getting back to that soft palate, you'll pinch it with the hard palate. And that's a lot of times when we hear moms complaining of nipple pain, it's because the baby isn't getting it back to that soft palate and it's pinching their nipple up against their hard palate. So the first thing that you want to think about is making yourself reclined. If you are sitting straight up or hunching over, like I see a lot of moms doing the first time they're breastfeeding, your back's gonna start hurting and baby's also gonna start slipping off of the breast. So if they started off in a really good breastfeeding position and they got your nipple back to that soft palate, since your breast is facing down, if you're bent over, because gravity kind of pulls their head down, they're gonna slowly slip off your breast and start pinching your nipple with their hard palate. So even if you start off with that good deep latch, by the end of the feeding, it's gonna be painful because they're gonna be pinching your breast. So you just wanna make sure that you are slightly reclined whenever you're breastfeeding, okay? The best way to do that is to make sure that your feet are propped up or you're relaxing on the couch. So once you have your feet propped up and you're ready to start breastfeeding, the next thing you want to think about is the breastfeeding position. I'll link a video about different breastfeeding positions, but for new moms, I really like to use the cross cradle position. So with the cross cradle, the side that you're latching on, you have a free hand. With the regular cradle, their head is cradled in your elbow. But with the cross cradle, this position is nice because you have that free hand that you can support your breast with, but you're also supporting baby's head, and they're in a good position where you can see them and you can see that latch. And so the cross cradle is just a really good position to start out breastfeeding. When you're doing any position, you want to make sure that your baby's tummy is firmly against your tummy. If they're not, so say their tummy's turned even just a little bit, then their head is not lined up with their spine. Okay, so this is lined up, that was not. Turn your head for me and try to swallow, just like this. You'll feel you use different muscles if your head is turned. Now imagine if I put a meal over here and I told you to eat. You might take a bite, chew, but you'll probably turn your head and then swallow, because that's your natural way of swallowing. It's just easier to swallow that way. That's what they're gonna do as well. So if their head is turned, they will slowly come off your nipple to swallow. So if they start off with that good deep latch, they'll start to turn their head, and when they do, they'll pinch your nipple on that hard palate, okay? So even if you start with a good deep latch, by the end of the feeding, it might be a little bit painful. That's why we want their head lined up with their spine. And the best way to do that is to make sure their tummy is pressed up firmly against your tummy. Same with any position. So if you're doing that football hold, we don't want to see the baby down like this. We want to see the baby up against your chest, just like this, okay? So tummy to tummy is the first step. The next thing, you want to make sure that their nipple is lined up with your cleavage. So you can see here, their nipple should be lined up with the middle part of your chest. That will make sure that they're in a good feeding position. A lot of times when I'm helping moms latch for the first time, they start with baby all the way over here because that lines the nipple up with their mouth. And most moms think that that's where they need to aim to feed something. But you actually need to aim your nipple at their nose. So the best way to line that up is to line their nipple up with the center of your chest or your cleavage, okay? Once they're in this position, you'll want to tuck their feet underneath your armpit to keep them kind of out of the way. You'll also want to make them hug your breast. So one hand on the bottom, one hand on top. That just ensures that baby doesn't have their hands in their mouth and getting in their own way. The next thing you want to do is kind of press their butts in with your elbow. When you press a baby's butt in, it opens up their hips, and that will help them lean back a little bit further. If a baby's hips are tight, like their legs are closed together, it's very hard for them to recline backwards and tilt their head back. But if a baby's hips are open, they can get their head leaning far back and their mouth wide open, so your nipple can go back to that soft palate. So that's why we suggest just pressing a little bit on their butts so their hips open up. So once you get the baby in a position where they're tummy to tummy, their legs are kind of tucked underneath your armpit, their hands are hugging your breast, their nipples lined up with your cleavage, and you've tucked their butts in just a little bit to open up their hips, you'll want to line your nipple up with their nose, which feels a little bit awkward because when you feed something, you typically aim for their mouth. But when you're feeding a breastfeeding baby, when you're aiming, if you aim at the mouth, when they open their mouth to latch, then they're not in the right position. But if you aim at the tip of their nose, when they open their mouth, it's perfect, okay? So aim it at the tip of their nose, even though it feels a little bit awkward to do that. Once the baby is lined up, they'll start to open their mouth just a little bit. Try not to restrict their head movement because they do need to lean their head back pretty far to get a wide mouth and get your nipple back to that soft palate. So instead, place most of your hand on the bottom of baby's head and then wrap it around the back to the bottom of the ear. That'll give them good head support, but it won't restrict their movement. When they start opening their mouth, don't instantly put them on because we don't want to latch them when their mouth is just a little bit open because there's no way that it's going to get back to that soft palate like we talked about at the beginning of the video. We want to wait until their mouth is wide open like a yawn so we can go ahead and put it in and get it back to that soft palate, okay? So wait for the baby to do a yawn motion before you bring them in to latch them. So once the baby's mouth is super wide open and looks like a yawn, you want to bring them to you instead of bringing your breast to them. Because if you're bringing your breast to them, you're going to slowly start to hunch over. You'll also throw off alignment, so there'll be a possibility you might not get back to that soft palate. Okay? So instead, bring your baby to you. And when you do bring them to you, try to get them to hit chin first. So you want their chin to hit your breast first. So it kind of looks like this. So they'll hit chin first, they'll go up and over. And do you see how the nipple lands on that soft palate? That's what we want to see. Now, of course, at first it's going to be fast and a little bit crazy and hectic, but over time you'll get the hang of it and you'll be able to get your baby to hit chin first. If you look down at your baby and it looks like their head is hunched over, something like this, that means your nipple is not on their soft palate. Because if they're hunched over, it's going to be very hard for your nipple to get back to that soft palate. So say this is their mouth. Instead of being backing out, it's hunched over. It's very hard for your nipple to get back there, okay? Their heads need to be tilted backwards. So if you notice that their heads are tilted like this, go ahead and shift them. So if they're positioned like this, shift them in just a little bit. You see that tiny motion? I'm pressing a little bit in between their shoulder blades and I'm moving their feet just a little bit to the other side. That's going to make it so their head goes back and their chin goes up and your nipple goes back to the soft palate. Okay? Once your baby is latched on, look down at your baby. There should be a little bit of room between your breast tissue and their nose. Also, they should have an asymmetric latch, which means the brown part of your breast has more in their mouth at the bottom than at the top. So if your baby is latching on in the cross cradle position, they will be sideways on the breast. So that means that more of your areola on this side will be in the bottom part of their mouth than on this side. So most of the brown area on the bottom part of the latch should be in their mouth. If you notice that they're directly center to your breast, then you're not going to get it back to that soft palate, so you want to break the latch and try to get a better positioning. You'll also want to make sure that their lips are flanged out. That means that both their upper and lower lip are flipped out. So if they look like this, that's not going to be comfortable. It's very hard for a baby to get a comfortable latch if their lips are curled in. If you see that, you can put your pinky in their mouth and try to wiggle their upper lip loose, so then it's flipped out. But if you can't wiggle it loose, that might be a time you want to talk to your lactation counselor if you're experiencing pain. The next thing you want to look at is the baby swallowing? So when a baby eats, they will suck, swallow, suck, suck, swallow, suck, suck, swallow, suck, 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 swallow. If you notice, say this is your baby's chin, when they're sucking, the chin is moving. When they're swallowing, the chin has to be still because they can't suck and swallow at the same time. So if they're swallowing, you will see a pause in their chin. That's a great sign that you're transferring milk to your baby. So unfortunately, with breastfeeding, it's hard sometimes because you can't tell how much milk is being transferred to the baby, compared to bottle feeding where you can see the milk come out of the bottle. But if you look for that chin pause, then you know that you transferred liquid to the baby and they have to swallow. So that's kind of like seeing the milk being transferred to the baby. So look for that chin pause, and that means that you are successfully breastfeeding. If you're experiencing any pain and everything looks normal, that's a great time to talk to the lactation counselor for some extra tips. If you have any other questions, feel free to call your local WIC office. Have a great day.